After a long wait, Genshin Impact's Vigilant Yaksha has returned. Xiao is a highly flexible DPS unit who can handle a variety of content well. In this video, we'll be explaining what Xiao has to offer and whether or not he is worth your Primo Gems. As always, if you enjoy a character for reasons like their voice actor, aesthetic, or personality, these videos are by no means meant to stop you from spending your Primo Gems on them. Instead, they should prepare you for the type of problems that you'll need to solve or work around to meet your gameplay expectations. Xiao's main damage source is his plunge attack, which he can perform with the help of his burst. His burst infuses his normal, charged, and plunging attacks with animo, and increases his jump height, allowing him to perform low and high plunges after jumping. Having his damage tied to plunging attacks means a few things for Xiao. On the plus side, he can shred through shields quickly, can deal damage in a huge moving AoE given that plunging attacks hit in a large area, and he can easily stagger enemies to prevent them from attacking or moving. On the flip side, the stagger effect Xiao causes can push enemies away, forcing Xiao to move and chase them. While this doesn't sound like a huge issue, it can be a problem if players are using a teammate with a buff locked to a circle, such as Bennett, who can only offer healing and attack bonus while players are inside his burst circle. Xiao also lacks a dedicated artifact set, as the only set which increases plunging attack damage is the 4-piece Shimenawa's Reminiscence set, which does not synergize well with Xiao because of its energy drain mechanic. He can, however, make use of 2-piece combinations, which makes him easier to build. Additionally, while his plunging attacks have a large AoE, Xiao's single target damage can be lacking in comparison to Genshin's high single target damage teams. This issue can, however, be somewhat alleviated with techniques such as the jet combo or collision plunges, which are explained in the Xiao guide on the Kaching Main's website. Now, let's talk about Xiao's teams. On the surface, Xiao's playstyle seems to be pretty simple, but he does need a few things in order to function well. The first thing Xiao needs is a battery on his team who can provide him energy, such as Sucrose or Jean, because he can struggle to keep his burst up in long fights. A possible alternative is to use Tophophonius Lance, which can allow Xiao to self-battery at high refinements, but this results in a damage loss for Xiao himself. The second thing that Xiao wants is a shielder. Although Xiao can dodge many enemy attacks by remaining in the air for a large portion of his uptime, when he plunges, he is momentarily locked in a state where he cannot dodge attacks, which leaves him vulnerable. A shielder mitigates this issue and allows players to use Xiao without the fear of dying on plunges. It is possible to play Xiao without a shielder, but players may struggle to survive with a combination of enemy attacks and Xiao's own HP drain. Having only these two conditions which need to be fulfilled makes Xiao's teams very flexible, as he can run teams ranging from the 5-star heavy Xiao, Jin, Zhongli, and Albedo team to free-to-play friendly Xiao, Sucrose, Diana, and Fischl. Of course, Xiao will perform better with some supports than others. Zhongli is a better shielder for Xiao than Diana, and Sucrose with Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers is better than Animo MC. But players aren't locked out of playing Xiao if they don't possess specific supports, which allow them to field Xiao easily. Xiao's teams also hold the advantage that they do not make use of popular supports like Xingqiu or Kazuha. Xiao also doesn't demand Bennett as much as other units like Zhongling do because of Xiao's inability to snapshot Bennett's buff and him needing to chase enemies, which can force him to leave Bennett's burst circle. This allows players to more comfortably build two teams for the Spiral Abyss, as they can then use Xingqiu and Bennett on their other team. But this does come with its own drawback. Similar to Ito, Xiao's incompatibility or suboptimal compatibility with some support units is both a blessing and a curse. Not being able to make good use of popular supports means that Xiao cannot be used with broken units who would have been able to improve his teams if he were compatible with them, which can lock Xiao's maximum DPS potential to a level behind that of units who can take advantage of these powerful supports. Additionally, Genshin currently does not have any Animo DPS support units. While defense scaling Geo characters have Goro and Pyro units have Bennett, there really isn't a dedicated Animo support, aside from arguably Constellation 4 Jean. Now, let's talk about Xiao's constellations. Aside from C6, Xiao's constellations do not provide a significant increase to his damage. Constellation 1 only provides one additional skill cast, which can lower energy requirements by some amount if players can clear all content in 2 bursts, but otherwise does not help Xiao much. Constellation 2 is also not particularly powerful, given that players should always have Xiao on field to collect particles after generating them with support units, making his off-field energy generation less relevant. Constellation 3 is only useful if players are planning to go for C6. 6, and Constellation 4 is mostly useless, given that Xiao should always be used with a shielder who can provide ample survivability. Constellation 5 does provide Xiao with a small amount of additional damage percent, but this does not significantly increase his DPS. Constellation 6 does allow Xiao to deal much more damage in multi-target scenarios where he is able to hit all enemies, but it's very difficult to master his C6 dash spamming, and if he can't reliably hit all enemies with his dash spam, then it may be better to simply plunge spam even with Constellation 6. Xiao's constellations are essentially all or nothing. If you truly want Xiao constellations, you should be prepared to go to Constellation 6 for a significant improvement in gameplay. So, when should you roll for Xiao? You should consider rolling for Xiao if you need a unit who deals extremely good AoE damage without requiring many meta supports. You should also consider rolling for Xiao if your mechanics are subpar, as his damage floor is very easy to reach. Lastly, you should consider rolling for Xiao if you currently lack DPS units who can deal with shields and other obstacles. On the other hand, you might not want to roll for Xiao if your current teams don't demand the same supports. For example, if you already have an Ayaka Freeze team and a Child Jungling Vape team, then Xiao's advantage of not demanding meta supports to allow for easier team building vanishes, since neither team demands units from the other. You also may not want to roll Xiao if you need a single target damage specialist. While Xiao's single target damage is good, it's not fantastic. Lastly, you may want to consider a different unit if you're unable to fulfill either the battery or shielding requirement. Xiao cannot self-battery, so he needs battery units, and he has trouble surviving without a shielder. Here's a quick recap of Xiao's pros and cons. Pros. He's great for AoE damage because of the large AoE that plunges have. He can deal damage without the need for many meta supports. He's super easy to play. He can shred shields super fast with plunges. His teams are flexible. And lastly, his plunges can stagger and stunlock enemies. As for his cons, he's reliant on a shielder and battery to solve energy and survival issues, and some people may not like battering him. He needs to chase enemies, which decreases synergy with supports who deploy fields like Bennett. He has relatively low single target DPS. There aren't many sources of Anemo-resistant shred, and most of them are 5-star constellation locked. Most of his optimal supports are 5-star units. And finally, he has limited free-to-play weapon options. Thanks for watching this quick overview of the Kaching Main's Theory Crafting staff's thoughts on Xiao. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and we will do our best to answer.